This is my story of how I ended up in the UK almost 20 years ago. Some of you have asked me for this in your comments, although I don't know why would anyone be interested. But then I thought, since I am 42, it has been almost 20 years, maybe it's time for some reflections. My relationship with my home country, which is Poland, is very complicated and kind of full of conflicts. On the one hand, I come from a family that is very rooted in Polish history. My granddad was a soldier in the Second World War. My grandmother has also experienced World War atrocities as she and her whole family were taken to Siberia, and she spent there 6 years from the age of, I believe, 10 till 16. So both of them have really experienced the major historical events during the Second World War. They were the history. That side of my own history and my own family is something I'm very proud of. On the other hand, I have had quite a difficult upbringing from the start, divorced parents, blah blah blah, and it wasn't easy for many reasons. That, in combination with other factors, made me feel like I don't really belong, and perhaps that kind of sparked my interest in traveling, and perhaps it was my way of at least mental escapism. I've always been a very busy student. Apart from your day school, I would go to piano lessons, English classes, martial arts classes. So I was always very occupied. As I was coming of age and I was approaching the age where I wanted to be more social, I started to break out from that busy, always studying life. And so as soon as I got opportunity to really break out of it, I did. Literally just after my first year of studies, I had an opportunity to travel to Mediterranean and do a little summer jobs, things like that, which I just grabbed with both hands. And I liked it a bit too much because effectively it meant that once I entered so-called adulthood and was able to be more independent and eventually left Poland, I never wanted to come back. I spent about 2 years traveling around Mediterranean, Malta and Italy. Of course, when you are a young girl and this is your first kind of real travel experience, you are in awe of everything. The beach, the sun, the cocktails. And for a long time I felt a bit guilty about it. But now looking back, I feel like this was the type of experience where you could just be so reckless, and being reckless is awesome. Through that, I met people from Wales, and I was invited to come to Cardiff, and at the time I didn't even know where Cardiff was on the map. I knew I wanted to leave Malta, but I didn't really know whether I wanted to go anywhere else from there. So I did go back to Poland, and I felt completely out of place. Out of place with regards to family, out of place with regards to what to do with myself, out of place with regards to my future plans, out of place because people I used to know have moved on and perhaps followed a more conventional path with regards to studies and getting jobs and things like that, and I was just there feeling shame about not fitting in because my last couple of years or so were so out of ordinary within the environment that I was brought up in. So then the opportunity to go to Cardiff came up, and again, I grabbed it with both hands. I didn't know what to expect. I guess it's just the nature of being young, where consequences and planning is not something you usually do. Cardiff started for me in the same way it probably started for millions of other Poles coming into the UK back when Poland joined the European Union. You don't realize how typical your path is as an individual until you hear the statistics. When you are part of certain movement like I was during the joining of the European Union, you kind of do become a statistic. I'm not saying it necessarily in a bad light, it's just how it is. Because I was already quite removed from life in Poland and the politics and the current affairs at the time, over a certain period of time I was still being taken by surprise of how many Poles there were in the UK. But at the same time, it was also quite comforting to find people that are familiar, that go through a similar experience. It was like a lucky coincidence. But going back to the typical start of my life in the UK, what I mean by that is I started working in bars and restaurants. Of course I did, but I absolutely loved it. And for the first 5 years of my life in the UK, that's when I met my husband. That's where I met friends that are still in my life up until today. We had so much fun. I was 20 something. For the first time, I was really, really independent. Financially, the UK society was extremely welcoming and tolerant, which I was not very used to coming from the environment I came from. And I can honestly say, when it comes to tolerance, I've learned it from the British people. So for 5 years, I worked in bars and restaurants. But then the time came where I started to realize that I can't really be doing that for the rest of my life. And I was probably reaching the age where I was just about young enough to turn my life around without huge consequences. I didn't have any kids. I was not really tied to Cardiff. I was not really tied to my job as such. So I decided to go back to university, which was yet another overhaul, which seems to be emerging as a bit of a pattern. Every time I made a decision to change something, it was an overhaul. I studied in a small town in Wales called Aberystwyth. It's a large university in a small town, and there was not much there apart from pubs on the pier and long country roads that you had to go through if you wanted to either get out or get in. And when I look back, I realized that nothing that I'm telling you now would have been possible if it wasn't for the people I met on the way that literally held my hand, kind of showed me the way. For some reason, I've just been so lucky with kindness. So after a couple of years of studying in Aberystwyth, my husband and I said, whoever finds a job first, that's where we'll go. I remember driving 6 hours for an interview from Aberystwyth to London in a broken, barely safe car. And that's how I got my first job after uni. And that was in Surrey, outside of London. During that time, I felt I'm completely independent and free from ties when it comes to Poland. But at the time, I didn't realize that I really wasn't. And that only became apparent when my granddad passed away and I had to deal with the issues of inheritance. And when I look back at it now, it feels like up until this point, the strings that were attached to me were almost invisible and very stretchy. When that time came, I felt like the strings started to pull me back and kind of reminded me about, hello, you are actually Polish, this is your country, and this is what's going on with your family, and you need to now pay attention. So it really brought me back, and there's been a number of turbulences, which meant that I was really not free from those ties at all. I was perhaps just trying to escape it all, but it eventually got me back. And the reason why I said at the start that my relationship with Poland is very conflicting and complex, it's because far I tried to escape, it always got me back. And what did get me back, it was never good. After 20 years of not living in Poland, only now I am becoming free from Poland. And it sounds awful and it sounds unpatriotic, but that's how I feel. So here I am, 20 years on, still standing. As an immigrant, perhaps you can also relate, but there's always gonna be this feeling of you neither here nor there. Like you want to belong in a place that you've fully established yourself in, but at the same time, you were not born here. So there'll obviously be either ties somewhere else or other people's perception of you, even though your sense of belonging may be very much here. But I would love to know your stories. If you have similar story to tell, if you can relate to anything that I'm saying, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I see you guys next time.